discuss on chapter number 4. Okay, the requirements for chapter number 4. So basically, last week, okay, we have covered, the previous week and also last week, okay, on the requirements for your chapter number 3, okay, and also how to apply SPSS, okay, how to use the program SPSS, okay, to answer your research questions 1, 2, and 3. Okay, so what we have learned so far, okay, including the SPSS program, okay. So now is the continuation from SPSS actually, okay, as a tool for you to answer your research questions and also your research objectives. Okay, so whichever thesis that you are referring to or journal articles, okay, that you read, okay, well, if you are reading journal articles, so it's very common that journal articles, due to the length of journal article is quite short, okay, it's only around 20 pages, 25 pages long, okay, maybe sometimes you may find that maximum 30 pages, but usually journal article is quite short, okay, less than 20 pages, 25 pages long. So you will not see a journal article has a table of content, okay, so that is not a requirement of a journal article, but it's very common to find in any journal article that the article is written by section, meaning that you will find the article is divided into 4 to 5 sections, such as the introduction and a brief literature review, okay, a short literature review, and then a short discussion on the method, and also a discussion on the results. Okay, and finally, the article will be concluded by the conclusion and some policy recommendation. So any journal article that you read, this is the common layout lah, which basically follow a normal thesis structure. Okay, so any thesis that you download, okay, or that you refer to in the Google Drive or any other sources, so you will find that these 5 chapters are the common chapters lah: introduction, literature review, method, and then the result section, and finally the last chapter, which is the conclusion, okay, and policy recommendation. So what we have discussed so far for the past 7-8 weeks, okay, we started with the chapter number 1, okay, highlighting on the importance of the problem statement, okay, and also on the research questions and research objective. So and then you cover on the literature review, okay, discussion on the theory, and also discussion on the past studies that are related to the issue that you are currently doing. Okay, so this is also an important part of academic writing. Okay, so next we have looked at the research method, okay, in which this research method is, the main purpose is to see how you plan to answer your research questions. Okay, in chapter 1, if you got 3 research questions, so you will need to explain how are you going to answer each of the research question based on the research method that you choose. Okay, whether it's for research method, research question number 1, research question number 2, and also research question number 3. Okay, most of these theses, so I selected a few lah, 28, 57, 20, and also 66. Okay, as an example for us to discuss, okay, the requirements for chapter number 4. Okay, so each of these theses, okay, what they have in common is that, especially for the first 3, okay, thesis 66 is basically using secondary data, okay, because the title is on the determinants of foreign direct investment. Okay, so whenever a paper or journal article or thesis is it relies on secondary data, so you will expect a regression technique. Okay, regression will be applied lah. So for example, in this particular thesis number 66, the student uses OLS, okay, panel OLS, and it will show. So the student lists down all the relevant techniques, okay, or tests that will be applied in order to answer the research questions. Okay, so beginning with the descriptive analysis, correlation, the OLS, and also the diagnostic test. Okay, whenever you apply a regression technique, so it's very common that you need to perform all of these diagnostic tests. So you have learned this in your basic econometric subject. Okay, so if you apply OLS, these are the common tests lah, checking for the problem of multicollinearity, hetero, and also autocorrelation, and how you overcome or how do you deal with such problems in your regression, so that when you want to interpret the output of your regression is free from this common problem lah. So even though you got some issues, these are common issues when it comes to regression. So you need to explain, okay, how you deal or how you overcome, okay, the common issues or the common problems when it comes to doing or using OLS. Okay, so that your findings, your conclusion will be a valid conclusion. Okay, if your regression suffer from all these problems, so whatever findings that you get from your regression will not be a reliable or valid output lah. Dia tak nak, you cannot, tak boleh kamu nak guna lah sebagai rujukan ataupun sebagai for you to interpret. Okay, because your regression is not valid lah if it suffers from this common problem. So that's why you need to list down all the tests, all the things that you will do, okay, to make sure that the analysis that you will end up using, okay, as to answer your research objectives, okay, will be valid. Okay, so this is an example of a thesis that relies on secondary data. Okay, but even though this is on secondary data technique, but if you go through some of these theses, okay, number 28, intention to purchase halal product, 57, factors affecting career choice, okay, number 20 on entrepreneurial intention, okay. So what these theses have in common, okay, so basically when you write your chapter number 3, okay, so you will mention, so these 3 topics are based on primary data, okay, based on questionnaire. That's what you are doing right now, okay, based on questionnaire. So you collect your data based on questionnaire. So when I discuss the structure of your chapter number 3, okay, you start by defining what is your research design, how do you plan to collect your data using simple random sampling, okay, how do you determine the sample size, okay, based on the Cauchy-Morgan table, what is your unit of analysis, what is the population frame, okay, if your sample is based on UUM student, how do you determine what is the total number of students from UUM or from COB or from SCFB. So this must be defined clearly in chapter number 3. And then you also explain okay, the list of items that you use in your questionnaire, okay, using Likert scale, for example. If you are using Likert scale, so what are the components in the questions, okay, in the Likert scale section, okay, for example. And of course, okay, I mentioned this before, if you are using primary data, okay, using questionnaire to collect your data, you need also to run what we call this reliability test. Okay, this using Chroma Alpha, I mentioned this last week. Okay, but because the data that you collect is not really based on actual respondent, so that's why I did not require this reliability test to be included. But you can still include if you want to. Okay, but of course the result may not be because in fact this is not part of the syllabus. Okay, the Chroma Alpha analysis as part of the reliability test is not part of your syllabus, but you can still include if you want to. Who knows, you may get some bonus marks, okay, because you apply. I mean, you can see how you can do this on YouTube. Okay, there are plenty of tutorials, okay, how to get Chroma Alpha output from SPSS. It's quite simple actually, but I did not show this. Okay, in your semester 7, when you want to do your research project, your kertas ilmiah, okay, if you end up using primary data as well based on questionnaire, so you need to run this, you need to have this reliability test, okay, as part of your analysis, because that is a requirement, okay, it's part of the process to show that the data that you collect from your questionnaire is valid, okay, is reliable, so that people, if someone read your project, someone read your thesis or your journal, okay, you have already shown that your questionnaire has passed di telah menepati the piawaian, okay, or the minimum standard, okay, so that all the items that you have in your questionnaire, okay, in general they pass the minimum standard. It's like the quality assurance lah, macam ISO, okay, so it's like SIRIM in Malaysia. So the product must meet the minimum quality. So that is what reliability test means lah, okay. So there are, and also, okay, you will find that many or some of the theses in the Google Drive or any other theses or journals that you read, okay, even though they use primary data, but you will still find people using regression technique. You can see here multiple regression analysis, even though this thesis is based on primary data. The same thing here, you can see multiple regression, okay, on thesis number 57. The same goes with thesis number 20. So all of these three theses, even though they rely on questionnaire, but the analysis is still done using regression, okay. So that's why you will see that one of the component in the Likert skill, the student define as dependent variable. Okay, if you got 4 Likert skill sections, perhaps one component from the Likert skill is categorized or defined as the dependent variable. Because if you want to run regression, you need to have dependent and also independent variables, X and Y. Okay, but why I do not require the regression technique to be applied in your analysis is what I mentioned before lah. Okay, you already learn regression in your basic econometric. Okay, so you learn basic econometric, you learn ordinary least square, OLS, autocorrelation, hetero, multi, whatever problems lah, whatever things that common issues or common techniques in OLS, you already learned that. Okay, and I'm sure in your assignment before, okay, you have assignment for you to run a simple OLS, okay, and interpret the coefficient, okay, beta 0, B1, B2, B3, interpret the output of your regression. Okay, so you have learned regression already. So that's why I do not require regression for you to apply in this particular subject. Okay, because we can apply other tools, okay, other technique, especially the one that you learn in your basic statistics, the t-test, the Anova f-test. Okay, so these two tests which I mentioned last week, okay, for you to answer your research question 2 and research question number 3. Okay, so that is part of the analysis technique. So even though you will find thesis using regression, okay, but that is not required lah, okay, because if you want to apply regression, you can do so maybe in the future, okay, in your semester 7, when you write your own project paper, your pentas ilmiah, okay, then if you still rely on primary data, okay, you can use regression technique as well. Okay, no problem lah. That is a common approach, okay, as long as your regression, the technique allows you to answer your research questions, your research objective, okay, you can use that as well. Okay, so that is the basic components, okay, if you find that you can find in chapter number 3. Okay, so for chapter number 3, as what we discussed before, okay, you will start by mentioning what is your sample design, your data, how you collect your data. Okay, so together with, if you are using, for example, F-test, T-test, so this is number 28, okay, I think is one of the easier thesis for you to follow as guideline, okay, when it comes to Anova and F-test, okay, and also T-test lah. You can see here, the student already, the student also apply the one-way Anova and also the T-test, okay, as what I've shown you last week, okay, using SPSS. So you can use this particular thesis as a guide, okay, to how to actually write your chapter 3 and eventually your chapter number 4. So chapter 4 is basically just a continuation from chapter 3. So basically you will follow the same structure, how you define the method that you will use. This is how you will actually explain or lay the layout, the structure of your chapter number 4. Okay, so I mentioned also previously, okay, your first research question is to look at the demographic characteristics of your respondent. So this is what you find in thesis 28. In fact, each of these theses, okay, whether they are using primary, secondary data like thesis 66, okay, it's very common that when you start your chapter number 4, you will begin with what we call as descriptive analysis. Okay, so you can find here also descriptive analysis in chapter number 4. Okay, and then you will have also here chapter 4, this one, descriptive analysis. Okay, so in thesis number 28, the student does not use the word or the term descriptive analysis, but he just use, or the student just use demographic background, but basically it's the same thing lah. Okay, so if you look at thesis number 20, for example, okay, page 40. Okay, so this is how the student actually summarize the output of the descriptive analysis, meaning that the student has put everything in one table. Okay, the main items in section A of your questionnaire, the age, education level, course structure. Okay, because I think this student also rely on UUM student lah as the respondent. So you can see, but thesis number 28, I think the student go a bit too detailed, okay, which is not really needed. I mean, if you look at the thesis number 28, the student actually has separate table for each of the item in section A. For example, gender, one table, age of the respondent, one table, okay, ethnic group, one table, which I think you can have something like this. It's easier. You put together the important items in section A and put it in one table and explain them in one or two paragraphs or one page. You can see here this descriptive analysis. Okay, basically this part is to explain the table 4.2. Okay, so rather than you have a separate table like this, which takes a lot of pages lah, and basically what you do is just repeating the stuff. Okay, table this shows this, how many Muslim, how many Christian, and blah blah blah, how many respondent has degree and blah blah blah. Okay, so you don't need to explain this way, which for me is a bit too detailed lah. Okay, you can follow this style, okay, on thesis number 20. So you can see that the table is very simple, okay, not taken directly from SPSS, okay, for sure, but using a simple line table lah. Okay, tak ada color, no fancy color, blue, red ke biru ke hijau ke, tak ada. Okay, just a simple. So this is what I expect to see lah also in your thesis. Okay, so you can start your chapter number 4 with the simple descriptive analysis. Okay, and then so if you look at this thesis number 66, which rely on secondary data. So secondary data analysis, the descriptive analysis is slightly different because you based on regression. So you will have something like, okay, what are the variables that you have in your regression? The dependent variable and followed by the independent variables. So usually even a thesis, even most journals, okay, journal articles that rely on secondary data, you will find a table of descriptive analysis, okay, showing what is the mean value, maximum, minimum, standard deviation. Okay, these are the common items lah, or the common statistics that is given for the descriptive analysis. Okay, but because you rely on primary data based on questionnaire, so you can just use this example, this format here. Okay, so of course, next is to go for the reliability analysis based on this Cromba alpha statistics. Okay, so I did not show you how to obtain this from SPSS, but if you want to include in your thesis, in your project, so you need to mention this Cromba, this reliability analysis in chapter 3 as well. Okay, and then you show the output in chapter number 4. Okay, so it's a simple technique just to actually justify that all the items in your Likert scale has achieved the minimum score, okay, or pass the minimum score of good or very good score. Okay, you can see, you can read basically any of these theses, they all apply the Cromba alpha analysis, okay, under this method. This one, okay, TC number 28 is on 4.2.2. Okay, so it's just a simple table just to show that what is the minimum score. Okay, usually below 6.6 is poor. Okay, more than 8 is considered good. So you want basically that the score to be above 0.8. Okay, on each of the section. Okay, the section in your descriptive, in your Likert scale section. Okay, so this is what how you actually present your Cromba alpha statistics. It's a simple table. Okay, so you can do this. Okay, how to obtain the Cromba alpha? Okay, you can figure out yourself lah. Okay, cari from YouTube from blog. Okay, simple thing to do. Okay, so apart from reliability analysis, which I did not show you how to do. Okay, so after you give the descriptive analysis, okay, and then you can proceed with the main the statistical technique lah, the statistical analysis using the t-test and also the Anova test. Okay, but before you go into that, okay, it's very common that, okay, for you to provide the summary mean. This is also part of the descriptive analysis, but you want to show before you go into the analysis what is the t-test, what is the f-test. Okay, you can also provide such table like this lah. Okay, providing the mean score, nilai markah purata, the mean score of each of the item in your Likert skill section. For example, for this particular thesis, okay, the student has the first item will be attitude, okay, and then subjective norm, okay, and then perceived behavioral control, okay, and then intention. So there are 4 sections. So each of the section, the student provide the mean score for each of the soalan, each of the item. So you can obtain similar output, okay, from your Likert skill section, okay, just by going, you just go to your SPSS, you can click on the, I think it's on the frequency or descriptive statistics, okay, on the relevant questions, okay. So I think on using the same data the same file which I use for our tutorial, okay, you can go to this descriptive statistics, you go to frequencies. Okay, you go to frequencies, and for example, if you want the frequency for all the questions under section B, for example, from B1, B2, B4, and B5, okay, and then just go to statistics, you can get the mean and also standard deviation. Okay, you can see that from this particular table here, the student provide two, mean and standard deviation. So this is what we do. We take the mean and standard deviation and click continue. Okay, and then you can find here. So this is the mean. Okay, you can see that for B1, the mean will be 4.63. Okay, this will be the mean, 4.63, and the SD will be 0.845. So this is what basically this part here, the mean and the standard deviation. Okay, so you can get each of the mean and standard deviation for all the items for section B, okay, B1 to B5, okay, the mean, standard deviation, mean, standard deviation. Okay, so just go to the, go to analyze, okay, descriptive statistics, go to frequencies, okay, and then select. So you can just select all the items, okay, and then obtain the mean and standard deviation. So it's very simple to do, okay, in order to reproduce a table like this lah for your Likert scale section. Okay, so one of the things that you can report in chapter number 4. Okay, so in thesis 28 also, you can see that how the student also apply the t-test. So I did mention last week, okay, research question number 2 is for you to apply the t-test using difference in terms of genders. Okay, so you can see that there is a significant difference of intention to purchase between gender. So this is what we did last week. Okay, between male and female. Okay, and you can test according to the different factor lah. Okay, if you got 3 factors, okay, for example, like in this particular thesis here, okay, so you can test the intention to purchase or factor salary, factor gaji, factor harga barang, whatever factor lah, in your Likert skill section, and you can do the t-test as what I've shown before. Okay, so this is how you report the output. Okay, so I will not show you how to get this. I already showed you last week. Okay, as part of the independent t-test requirement. Okay, to answer your RQ2. Okay, and finally, RQ3, research question 3, the use of Anova. Okay, same here. It requires more than 2 groups. Okay, 3 groups and above. For example, by ethnic groups. Okay, Malay, Chinese, Indian, or religion. Okay, or you can do by course structure, economics, finance, banking, agribusiness, or you can group by colleges, by schools. So these are the things that you can do under one-way Anova. So already, okay, I've shown you what you can do in your Anova. Okay, you can, if you look at this output here, okay, the student put this post-hoc test. Okay, so basically post-hoc test. Okay, when you run the Anova, okay, you can go to click on this post-hoc. Okay, so one for only actually is here. The option is here. So when you click on this option here, you should be able to reproduce or obtain this post-hoc test for your analysis. Okay, so you can read the thesis, see how the student actually describe, okay, on or apply the post-hoc test. I think last week I showed you using LSD. So some use LSD, some authors use Bonferroni. Okay, these are different options lah. Okay, so but I do not want to go into detail because I'm not really sure what is the difference for each of these item. Okay, so that is, so if you want to refer, if you want to apply Bonferroni here, for example, okay, you can do so lah, because you are just simply following this thesis or any other journal or thesis. Okay, so but the main thing is how you interpret the output. Okay, how you answer your research question. So for Anova and F-test, okay, you can refer to thesis 28, for example. Okay, you can find other thesis or journals, okay, to guide you how to present your output. Okay, so this is the way which I expect the table should look like. Okay, a simple table, which you can see what is the P value, what is the F statistics, and so forth. Okay, and it's also very common, as what I've shown you previously also, to run a simple correlation test. Okay, Pearson correlation test. Okay, many of the theses that you will find, or even journal articles, okay, in chapter number 4, okay, they will also show what is the correlation correlation statistics. Okay, this one. Di mana dia correlation? Yeah, this one. Okay, Pearson correlation. So if you look at thesis number 28, okay, the correlation is a bit is little bit quite too detailed, which I don't really prefer lah. Okay, if you look at this output here, okay, the student actually run the correlation by within each of the Likert skill section. Okay, so but what you can do is you can follow this is 57 for example, and you run the correlation based on the grouping of each of the variable. Okay, if you recall last week, okay, I show you how to calculate the mean value of each of the component. You can get the mean for B1 to B5. You can get the mean of C1 to C5. Okay, you can get the mean for section D, D1 to D8. Okay, so when you create each of the new variable, the mean of D, the mean of section C, the mean of section D, then you can run the correlation based on the grouping of the variable. Okay, which in a way you can okay, in other words, you can reproduce this table okay, because this is basically the mean value okay, between each of the grouping, okay, because you cannot run, but if you run the correlation by item, then you will get something like thesis number 28 lah, which for me is a bit too much, okay, because you don't end up interpret every single value, okay. So I would prefer you to have something like this lah, okay, correlation analysis, just to give you an idea, okay, hubungan antara the relationship between the factors, okay, in your Likert scale, whether it's positively correlated or is it negatively correlated, and adakah dia significant ataupun tidak, okay. So again, you can find this correlation statistics within this correlate here by variant, okay. So you can choose the correlation, okay, and then just to give an example between V1 and V2, for example, and in the options you can see here is shown as Pearson, okay, Pearson, and then you can show what is the okay, you click OK for example here, so you can see that this is the correlation statistics and this is the P value, okay, whether it is less than 5% or more than 5%. So this is obviously more than 5%, so you cannot reject lah. So what the table that you see here, whether ada two star or 1 star significant at 1%. So that one is basically based on this value lah. Okay, so this is above 5%, so it's not significant. Okay, so this is how you can do correlation. Okay, again, okay, you can refer to the previous lectures, okay, which I've showed you how to do this correlation analysis. So correlation, okay, t-test, f-test, Anova, okay, and if you want to include the Chromba alpha, the reliability test, okay, as part of your analysis, okay, you can do so as well. Okay, so these are the things that you can do in chapter number 4. Okay, as long as you are clear how you can how to explain the output, and also don't forget how to relate your findings based on past studies. Okay, if you look at thesis number 28, for example, okay, in the analysis, you will find that okay is the student in some of the analysis, okay, for example like this, okay, this finding is consistent with previous studies by okay Bond, Burme, whatever. Okay, so this is how you need actually to justify, okay, in your own thesis, okay, in your journal. I mean, if you read journal, for example, okay, part of the academic writing process, okay, is to show that your analysis, your findings, is it similar or is it supported by other people's findings? So you want your analysis to have some backup lah, maknanya whatever that you find in your findings is not you are the only one yang jumpa benda tu. Maknanya if you find that the hubungan, the relationship is positive, okay, so you want to show that your findings is also similar, okay, or consistent with what other people has found. And all the papers that you mentioned here, okay, this must appear in chapter 2 first lah. That is the purpose of literature review. Okay, when you write your literature review, the purpose of literature review is to provide you with the background study, okay, or evidence, so that that you can use to back up your findings in chapter 4. So for example, Bond, Burme, and whatever here, basically you should have discussed these items, these studies in your literature review first lah. Okay, because if you say that your finding is consistent with these people, so you must have discussed what each of these paper actually look at, okay, in your literature reviews in your chapter 2. Okay, so that is again the purpose of one of the reason why you have chapter 2 for literature review, so that all the papers that you have included in the review, okay, can be used, okay, to support your findings in chapter number 4. Okay, so you can refer to other theses as well or other journals, see how the students, okay, write down, okay, or present their chapter 4 and also relate their findings with past studies. Okay, so this is what I also look for, okay, in your literature, in your chapter number 4. Okay, as part of your analysis lah. Okay, shows that you need to show that your findings is similar to this, and this study again must be reported earlier lah. Maknanya you must discuss this study earlier in chapter number 2, so that whatever that you show, whatever uh, papers or articles that you cite, okay, that you want to refer to support your findings must be discussed earlier in chapter number 2. Okay, so I think these are the important ones lah. Okay, for regression, we don't use regression for your project for this class. Okay, even though you can do that if you want to, provided that you have a dependent variable lah. Okay, in your Likert skill section. Okay, but if you don't, but I don't require that analysis in your research question, because I only require the T test and also the F test. Okay, so you can skip the regression analysis part. Okay, but you can still read how the student actually present this thing lah. But the important ones I think I've already covered lah, in terms of how do you need actually to present your. So you can use this thesis 28, 57, 20, okay, and other thesis lah that rely on primary data. Okay, go and open them and read them and see what are the common structure, okay, format yang sama lah, what are the similarities among all of the theses, all of the journals when it comes to presenting their findings. Okay, so once you get a clear idea, so it's up to your own creativity lah. Creativity means you need to show that you understand this is the standard format when it comes to chapter number 4. Okay, so how you should present, how you should write your output, okay, the words, the language that you want to use, okay, how you present your table, okay. So you can refer to this thesis as part of your example how you should prepare your table. Okay, so this is what I'm looking for lah, simple line table. Okay, macam ni lah, thesis 20 also very consistent in terms of the table structure. Okay, so you can refer to thesis 20 as well, okay, as part of the guideline or part of example how should you present your tables, okay, for thesis number 20. Okay, thesis number 57, not so much, because the student use all this line box table, which I don't really, it's not really common lah. It looks very messy. Okay, so go for something like this lah, easier to and much more consistent with the practice in journal. Okay, banyak journal pun guna yang cara yang sama lah macam ni. Okay, they use similar approach. Okay, so I think that is what I want to highlight in chapter number 4. Okay, so basically it's a continuation from chapter 3. Okay, whatever techniques, methods that you outline in chapter number 3, you must show that how you apply those techniques, the findings of that techniques, the use of those techniques in chapter number 4. Okay, and see and read all as many theses as possible, see how the student actually present their chapter 4, so that it actually answers your research questions and your research objective. So even though in our project this semester, okay, I mentioned that for RQ1, research question 1 is just about providing the descriptive analysis or demographic background of your respondent. Okay, so but in many of these theses that you read in that you can find, demographic background or descriptive analysis is not part of your research question. Okay, but it's just like an introduction. Okay, mukadimah, background is just before you go into detail of your chapter 4. It's very common that, okay, you want to explain what are the characteristics of your respondent, okay, under descriptive statistics. Okay, but in your project this semester, okay, you can use descriptive statistics as part of the answer or solution for your RQ1. So your RQ1 is basically can be answered by using the descriptive statistics alone. Okay, pie chart, bar chart, or simple table is what you see in this thesis. So it's not compulsory to use histogram or bar chart, pie chart, whatever lah. Okay, as long as you can present, you can explain the key statistics, okay, the key structure of your respondent, that should be enough for me. Okay, so provided that you use the right language, okay, tak ada minimize on the grammatical error. So basically, just refer to these good journals and thesis, okay, as your guide to present your chapter 4. Okay, so not all of the components that you see in this thesis are relevant to you. Okay, so if you find it relevant and you can do and you can present and you can use them, then and you can go ahead lah, use that. Okay, but if the items are not relevant to you or the analysis is not relevant to you, then you can skip that. Okay, so you can add some other new analysis if you want to, but don't. But the minimum one that I require is the F test, okay, the T test, the correlation, the Pearson correlation, okay, and also the descriptive statistics, okay, cross tabulation, cross tab. I showed you cross tabulation before, so that can be used as part of your solution to answer your research question 1. Okay, but for research question 2 and research question 3. Okay, you need to use the T test and also the F test lah. Okay, the correlation, okay, can be used for your RQ1. Okay, the P can be used to answer your RQ1 also. Okay, just to provide or maybe not RQ1. RQ1 is just about the demographic background. Okay, so you can use the correlation, the Pearson correlation, like as an introduction of your RQ2 or RQ3 lah. Okay, before you run your T test and your F test, you can just provide what is the correlation statistics. Okay, just to give an idea the hubungan or the relationship between the variables in your data. Okay, whatever it is, go and read this thesis, get the idea how to present this output. Okay, so that there is a continuous and consistent flow. Okay, flow of from chapter 3 and then chapter number 4. Okay, so whatever that you plan to use in chapter 3, you must present them in chapter 4. So how you plan to answer RQ1, RQ2, and RQ3, that must be shown in chapter 3, and then you show the output in chapter 4. So don't introduce new things in chapter 4 if you don't mention that in chapter 3. Ini satu masalah lah. So sometimes students they show an analysis or output from SPSS, okay, but they don't define or they don't mention that analysis in chapter 3. For example, in chapter 4, you provide the table for correlation, okay, Pearson correlation just now, but you don't mention about correlation analysis in chapter 3. Okay, so you must mention correlation. For example, here you can see here 3.6.4 Pearson correlation. So because you mentioned you are going to use Pearson correlation, so that's why in chapter 4 you can have Pearson correlation lah in 4.5. Okay, but you cannot have correlation in chapter 4 without mentioning or without writing Pearson correlation in chapter 3. So it must be both ways. Okay, mention in chapter 3 first, then show the output in chapter 4. Okay, and vice versa lah. So if you mention something that you want to do in chapter 3, but you don't show the output in chapter 4 pun salah juga lah. So whatever that you plan to use in chapter 3, it must appear in chapter 4. Okay, and vice versa lah. Okay, so whatever that you plan to use, okay, show that output in chapter 4. Okay, so I think that is basically the main structure of chapter 4. And don't forget, okay, whatever that you write, okay, you must support by mentioning that your findings is consistent, is supported by study by Mr. X, Mr. Y, Mr. Z, as what you can find in many journals, okay, or some articles. For example, in chapter in thesis 28, also I showed just now, okay, that the student mentioned in simple 1 or 2 lines, this finding is consistent with, okay, study by Mr. X, Mr. Y, Mr. Z, for example. So this is also what I expect to see. Okay, because in academic writing, okay, you must demonstrate that your the ability to connect your findings with past studies. So that is what a good academic paper is about, okay? Connecting or relating your paper, your analysis with the previous studies, okay? Because without that, it's like you don't really use the literature review section, okay? So one of the purpose of literature review is to help you to justify your findings, okay? So that will be part of the and also the structure of your table, okay, the notes, for example here, what 1 star or 2 star means, okay, the tajuk of your table, okay, the font size, so these are the things that I will look for, okay, when you present your chapter 4. Chapter 4 yang nampak berterabur ke, very messy, okay, some table you put different font, then the structure of the table is not presentable, okay, you can I mean, there are many, if there are so many problems or issues with your chapter number 4, which I think I mentioned many times, that is the main section or the section that contribute the most marks in your group project, okay? So apart from chapter 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, there are 5 chapters. Chapter 4 contribute the most marks in your project. Okay, so make sure that you put extra effort, okay, extra attention to detail when it comes to presenting your chapter 4. Okay, so I think I've said enough. So I think on next Thursday, okay, we can discuss on the conclusion. So I think we can finish our syllabus earlier, okay, maybe this week or latest by early next week. I'll see what we might need to do by next week. Then you can have like around 2 weeks, okay, of let's say extra time lah, meaning that we may not have any lecture with for the next 2 weeks, okay, for you to prepare your video presentation and also the writing up of your individual assignment and also your group assignment, okay, your group project. So the deadline for both, okay, I again have not updated in your OL, but what I mentioned before, you may need to submit your oral video presentation by the 3rd week of January, meaning before the 22nd of January. Okay, and the final submission of your written project, individual and also group, okay, you may need to submit by the end of this month, meaning up before the semester ends lah, on the 29th of January. So that is the plan. Okay, so make sure that you utilize, okay, the next couple of weeks, okay, to do the analysis and writing up of your group and also individual assignment. Okay, and not to forget, okay, to check for turning in. Okay, which I mentioned that the score or the similarity index should be below 30% lah. Okay, which I think is quite high. Okay, but meaning that you can afford to have a lot of similarity index, okay, similarity in your write-up lah, okay, but not exceeding 30% lah, okay, in your individual and also in your group project. Okay, so I will leave it to you to discuss, and I'll see you inshallah next Thursday. Okay, thank you. Assalamualaikum and good afternoon.